You are listening to Global Warning, hosted by Stuart Schofield. This is the cinema show by Genesis from that fantastic album, Selling England by the Pound. And it's a pun. Today, we are discussing climate change, possible solutions to climate change, and the reasons that we know it's being caused by humanity. That was The Cinema Show by Genesis, and I personally love the whole song and 10 out of 10 recommend it to anyone at all. Sometimes it does feel like everything is just one big show on repeat, the same characters acting out the same roles over and over again with only the setting changing. There are many issues with this show that could easily be solved if people worked together collaboratively instead of competitively. It is, however, a great show that I intend to keep viewing for all my life. But I digress. Now, back to this show. You are listening to Free FM 89.0, independent community media. This is Global Warning, and I am Stuart Schofield. In this segment, and for the past couple weeks, we've been talking about the science and the reasons that we know that climate change, this segment of climate change, has been caused by us. In millennia past, climate change has been caused by extraterrestrial events. Let's take, for instance, 65 million years ago, the asteroid that struck the Earth and sealed the dinosaurs' fate. What's interesting about 65 million years ago, the asteroid that led to our ancestors ruling the Earth and eventually evolving into us, what's interesting about that asteroid is when it collided with the Earth, it brought up tons of ash, dirt, and other matter and scattered it into the atmosphere, decreasing the amount of light that could enter the Earth. Less light could strike the Earth, which led to a cooling of the planet, and it lasted for 3 whole years, so the planet really cooled off. This brings the idea that perhaps a volcano will erupt and have the same effect, a scattering of ash into the atmosphere that will decrease the amount of light allowed into the atmosphere. Though this could have unforeseen consequences and be highly impractical and a silly thing to rely on to save us. A much safer, easier, and better method, in my opinion, would just be to plant more trees. Doesn't that make more sense? Instead of increasing the amount of pollution in our atmosphere, we should plant more trees, which decrease the amount of pollution in the atmosphere. Basically, what I'm saying is that we need some system with which to cool our planet down. And right now, we don't have one. We've all heard how 2 degrees is the point at which the planet becomes unsustainable. But my question is, why 2 degrees? Why stop at 2 degrees? What's to stop us from going to 8 degrees, to 9 degrees, to 10 degrees? There's nothing. We have the Paris Agreement, we have the Kyoto Protocols, but they don't seem to have done very much to stop this global issue from occurring. All that's happened is it's gotten worse. The planet has gotten worse overall. The effects of climate change are more visible than ever before. There are no systems in place to stop this from occurring, the planet continuing to warm. We don't have an active governmental system to cool our planet down. And it seems insane to me that the future of this world is up to about 190 different sovereign nations, each with their own views, each with their own needs and necessities. And some people only blame the developing countries, which I think is silly because the developed countries of the world, America, Russia, Europe, all of those areas have polluted and created so much catastrophic damage that now all these developing countries are growing and beginning to pollute more, but are still polluting nowhere near as much as these developed countries. But people insist on only blaming the developing ones, which I think is nonsensical. The developed countries should be the ones making the change and making sure that the developing countries can develop renewably and in a system that makes sense. Produce solar, produce hydro, produce wind. Give them the technology and the ability to do this, and we will have a better planet, is my opinion. But the past couple weeks, I've been playing segments of a discussion that I had with the president of the global concern on the dangers, reality, and why we know that climate change is being caused by humanity. For instance, one thing that I didn't know before having this discussion is that in the 4.6 billion years the planet has been around, every geological era has been divided by climate change, usually caused by an extraterrestrial event. But this era has had no extraterrestrial event, so the only cause could be us. I will be playing part 3 of that today, but access to the other parts and other shows and other segments of this show are available at accessradio.org. Again, that is accessradio.org. Here is the third part of that discussion now.
If you are right, and I'm right, and we are warming the planet to such a level, and let's get this in perspective. We have 2 sister planets. They're in the Goldilocks zone. It's a zone that we look for other planets. We go out into space and we look for planets that are near stars that can support life like ours. And we call it the Goldilocks zone.
Where it's close enough to the sun that it's warm, but not far enough that everything freezes.
Correct. And it's supportable from life. So we've modified that picture of the Goldilocks zone when we've found things like subterranean warmed oceans, and we've looked at life that can be found in the San Andreas Fault, along or the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, or all these other extraordinary places where life can actually extreme conditions. So the Goldilocks zone we've expanded, but in that Goldilocks zone we have Mars and Venus. All right, so we have what could happen to our Earth. Look at Venus. So Venus, because of carbon dioxide and methane, these are greenhouse gases, and we call it greenhouse simply because it's an analogy to what we're talking about. It's an easy way to explain how a greenhouse heats up, because we all have a greenhouse or a glass house, because light comes in and it keeps warming.
And it keeps it warm. If you walk into a glass house, you notice the warmth.
But the reality is that carbon dioxide and methane traps electromagnetic light, in that spectrum, and heat. And so it retains that heat. So that has happened on Venus, similar size to us, similar distance from the Earth, and yet on Venus, lead is liquid. It melts lead. That's how hot it is. We would be endangered by even a 2-degree increase on planet Earth. 2 degree.
Yeah.
And what happens after 2 degrees? Why would it cool down? The same factors, and also you get other participating factors, such as the increased in release of methane that's trapped in the permafrost, right? That's more across Siberia, right? All these things.
It's a continuous cycle.
That could be a self-perpetuating cycle that we are. It's a mystery. It's a dangerous mystery to us, but the fundamental question becomes, how do we prevent a continued... So we accept, okay, well, we're going up 2 degrees. Well, when we're at 2 degrees warmer, just like we accepted we'd have 300 parts per million carbon dioxide. Well, now we have 400 parts per million carbon dioxide. Well, what is going to be unacceptable to... And it doesn't matter what we want. What's unacceptable to us and our laws and our puny, silly way of doing things. It's how does nature decide for us? Because nature, and I think it was Margaret Evans on your show that said something like that nature has the trump card.
And it's also about, when does this change start? If it doesn't start at 2 degrees, when places in the Middle East become uninhabitable and that leads to more of a refugee crisis and all of these other things, if we don't stop it there, when do we start to stop it?
Well, if you look at the history of the global temperature, it started not long after the Industrial Revolution, and it continued to get quite a boost after World War II. So I'm afraid to tell you that it's already started.
Yeah, but when
So,
do we?
but in
no,
the
not
90s,
started.
we could not ignore it anymore in the 90s.
Yeah, when do we start to change?
There was a debate in the 60s, but
Yeah, there
there
was.
isn't a debate anymore, and that's what I'm trying to get across in this discussion with you today. That time for that debate is over. The time now is for answering the questions of how effective can we be in trying to combat this.
The debate should not be on whether or not it's us. The debate should be on what can we do about it.
Correct.
In New Zealand, just a few weeks ago, they made single-use plastic bags not usable. They passed legislation to stop single-use plastic bags. They made...
Yes, They did. So I think that it's very good that we are conscious of the environment and conscious of the effects that we can have on the environment. And plastic is a very good example of
For
a
marine life
negative effect that we can have. Why I'm always struck, and what I've been struck by when I have conversations with people about global warming or climate change around New Zealand and in Hamilton, and when I go to the bank or when I go anywhere, is that as soon as I mention the issue of climate change, I get the issue of plastic back, as if they're linked, which they're not. So they're linked in such a sense that, plastic comes from oil, I suppose, but really the issue of recycling, which is a separate issue again to global warming. And in some ways, it depends how you recycle. By the way, I'm big for recycling. Don't get me wrong. But, there is global warming impact in recycling. So, for example, you have to transport things. It might work out. I mean, you have to transport raw materials too.
Someone else can do the math.
But I'm just saying that those are the calculations that we need to do when we try and assuage our concerns on climate change, that we're doing something. So it might seem like to people that they're contributing because they're recycling, but they are not. But they leave the light on, and they are expensive, and they overuse the car and so I'm just saying that the consciousness of the real science of what is helping needs to be in people's lexicon of words, their understanding of the issues and their lifestyle. So a personal responsibility of what they can do. So, and really, I presented that idea of a wind machine that everybody could use. I have one. I set it up. I bought it on Christmas. It would have been like 3 years ago. And it's just a little wheel that spins around. We could have used that to generate power. It's still spinning around 3 years later. It cost me $1. Could we not conceive that we could have these on every windy rooftop on every place in the country, and that could generate power to be added to the grid? And if it helped a little, it would help. So we don't, and for a country that has renown for its innovation, we should be so and use these ideas to try and help in a global way as an example globally to how we can contribute. Our citizens can each, with their personal responsibility, assist and feel like they are contributing to this problem.
Rather than doing plastic and not necessarily...
and doing plastic. It doesn't have to be exclusive.
We're all in favor of using less plastic because we like the marine life, we like the turtles, we like the fish,
Yes.
we like all of those things. But in terms of global warming, plastic is not an issue.
It doesn't contribute to the global warming as far as I can say. I mean,
there might be very small effects, but certainly not as much as a power plant.
Well, here is the interesting thing. We talked about the Earth in geological time. So first thing to learn is that when there are large periods of volcanism, where there's lots of earthquakes, volcanoes, and this material is poured into the atmosphere, certainly a lot of carbon dioxide goes into the atmosphere, but the net effect in a volcanic eruption is a cooling of the planet. So oftentimes in geological time, large volcanic activity has cooled the planet. And the reason for that is it's called black carbon that goes up into the atmosphere, and it shields the planet from the sun's rays. So it actually cools down the planet. So when we are talking about coal, some of that coal burning is a cooling down the atmosphere as well. I'm just saying. So we're adding carbon dioxide, but little particles of dust and
Particulate matter
particles
just
of
staying as a shield.
is going to cool the atmosphere. When we do things like burn fuel and only produce carbon dioxide, then we are putting a gas into the atmosphere that is warming it without any offset smoke. All right, I'm just saying things are not as clear cut as they seem. So
They never are.
So
Nothing's black and white.
right, so when you burn plastic, there's a lot of smoke too. So
Yes.
I'm just saying that smoke is a contributing factor in the cooling of it as well. All right.
And an interesting thing about polyester, because polyester, or some types of polyester, is made from recycled plastic, and I feel like it actually has a negative opinion, because recycling plastic polyester and washing that material actually sends little tiny fibers of plastic into freshwater environments, which goes into the water systems and then affects ecosystems there, or can make it into drinking water. So if you wash recycled polyester made from plastic, then it's still got the plastic in it, which comes off, and it's
Right.
too small to be filtered.
I see. Yeah.
So it gets through the filtration systems, gets into the water, gets into the ecosystem, and has a net negative effect rather than a net positive effect.
Yes. And just to go back to our original discussion, right? I did think of another way that we can help dramatically and link this to the natural world. So I was saying that even Christianity incorporates aspects of the natural world. And we have a Christmas tree. A Christmas tree. That really comes from originally the
The pagan.
pantheism of the Germanic,
German.
in forests.
Cutting down
God-
a tree, bringing it in, and that
Right.
comes from the Germans. It was probably a thing by the Christians to convert more people. So they incorporated that in, and all the Germanic people came with them.
However,
Not the point.
we won't
Just the theory as well.
espouse on your theory for now, but I would just like to bring up the point that trees are the solution. So to a lot of the excess carbon that we have put. So in planting a tree, and also I was just also bringing up the fact that Christianity incorporates the natural world in its rituals as well. But trees sequester carbon dioxide. So they, without having to have elaborate machines that are going to trap carbon dioxide and bury it in hillsides, which remarkably is a plan, we could plant more trees and incorporate nature's own way of reducing carbon dioxide and increasing oxygen on our planet. And yet we are deforesting.
Yeah.
So
It's like a carbon sink in your backyard.
yes.
That's what a tree
Yes,
is.
but I did want to bring it back to that original idea that we were discussing, the Maori way of reverence for the environment. And I would recommend that you have somebody on your show to discuss with you aspects of the way Maori views changes in the climate and how they feel or their official position is on those issues.
Yeah, since New Zealand is a two-culture society
Certainly.
after all.
Yes.
Today we are out of time, and thank you for coming onto the show today. And
Well, it's been my pleasure.
it's been my pleasure as well. I feel like people can really learn a lot of things.
Well, I was hoping just to give a very broad sweep of the understanding of why climate change is a compelling reality and explaining it in such a way that most people, I think, could be able to understand it. The fact that we have these epochs in time divided by climate change. We have the climate change, but we don't have the disaster, the natural phenomenon that is usually associated with that change.
And so the only alternative is us.
Pointing the finger at the human race.
Thank you for listening. I have often heard people blame climate change on sunspots, but it is interesting to me because sunspots have decreased. That means that if sunspots were the main cause of climate change, the planet would be cooling. After all, the sun is at a solar minimum. In fact, it is extremely uncharacteristic for the sun to be this quiet. So if sunspots and solar events are the cause, the main driver of climate change, the planet should be cooling off, not warming up, because the sun is at a minimum. This means that when the sun hits a maximum, the planet will warm up at an even more exponential rate. It essentially means that right now there are no sunspots, the planet should be cooling, however it's warming. So when sunspots come back, perhaps it will warm at an even more rapid rate, which will be disastrous for every living thing on this pale blue dot. Earlier in the discussion, we brought up religion and religion's reverence for the natural world. Many, if not all religions, have some reverence for the natural world, with emphasis on Maori culture and its reverence for the natural world, in which all things are connected. So, given the fact that everything is connected, whether people like it or not, we should use this connection to better ourselves and our species. Use a system from a foreign country that works and incorporate that technology because it has a positive result. We should be connecting the world, not dividing it. After all, isn't it the diversity that makes us one? Yeah, we should connect the world instead of dividing it simply because everything is connected in the first place. What is it, 6 degrees, 7 degrees of separation? In fact, the world is so connected, it's one big ecosystem, and there's a disaster coming forward. The disaster has been recently called by Helen Clark the apocalypse. Very strong language for a very strong issue. In fact, it's unexaggerated language. If we continue to do nothing about this global warming, I'm fairly certain the apocalypse will ensue. So I'd like to end today on a happier note, oh Christmas tree, because trees are part of the solution to climate change.
Oh Christmas tree, with faithful leaves unchanging. Oh Christmas tree, with faithful leaves unchanging. Not only green in summer's heat, but also winter's snow and sleet. Oh Christmas tree, with faithful leaves unchanging. Oh Christmas tree, of all the leaves most lovely. Oh Christmas tree, of all the leaves most lovely. Each year you bring to me delight, gleaming in the Christmas night. Oh Christmas tree, of all the leaves most lovely. Tannenbaum, wie treu sind deine Blätter. O Tannenbaum, wie treu sind deine Blätter. grunzt nicht nur so Sommer seid, nein auch im Winter, wenn es schneit. Oh Tannenbaum, wie treu sind da